Welcome to the Docs Who Lift podcast, where we distill and simplify the complexities of a healthy lifestyle, exercise, medicine, and weight loss. We're excited to bring you a podcast that's a prescription for clinical practice, scientific recommendations, and just real life. This is the Docs Who Lift podcast.
Hey, and welcome back to the Docs Who Lift podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Spencer Nadolsky. Co-host here, Dr. Karl Nadolsky Jr., super endocrinologist. And today we have, and I say this every time, but a very special guest, food science babe. She sometimes tells people her first name, which is Erin, but I like to refer to her as food science babe. And she has an amazing Instagram. In fact, I'm pretty sure. I mean, I think I can say this. I think she's probably the best at debunking just all the nonsense stuff around like food science, hence the moniker food science babe. But anything from, I was just looking at her shelf life, which is, I don't even know much about shelf life of food.
Shelf life?
Like of like foods, like Best Buy and all that. I think we'll have to get into some of that stuff. But
yeah, that's beyond me.
But I'm actually, I'm interested to know why you started your page, because we talk about why we did, because we're so sick of the nonsense out there. But like, if you could just kind of give a quick little overview of why you started your page, and again, you're widely popular. I think you're the best out there in terms of debunking this stuff. I don't see anybody doing it like you do.
Well, thank you. Yeah, same with me. I was sick of the nonsense. Yeah, so I started my page, I think it was like 5 years ago now. Same kind of thing. I mean, I've worked in the food industry now for a little over 10 years now. And I've worked in a lot of different sectors of the food industry. I've worked at large companies, small companies, organic, natural companies, conventional companies. And I just saw so much misinformation, and mostly from people who have never worked in the food industry. And so it just got to the point where, and a lot of this stuff too were things I used to believe before I worked in the food industry, just regarding organic food, GMOs, all that kind of stuff. And so, when I was looking online for information, I found a lot of the misinformation. And so I was like, there's not really, there were a lot of great dietitians debunking nutrition myths and stuff like that, but I didn't really see anybody specifically doing food science type of stuff. So it just got to a point where I was so sick of it. I was like, okay, I'm just going to start a page. And I had no idea if it would even go anywhere, or I didn't really have any idea of even what I was going to post about, but I was just so sick of it. I was like, I'm going to start a page. And yeah, it kind of blew up.
That's so cool. What's your background in? Like, did you get a degree in this, or how does it work?
So I have a BS in chemical engineering. So I didn't go for food science, but I got into the food industry after graduating from college. So I was more like on the engineering side of things, working at a corn milling plant for a while, decided I wanted to get more into R&D. And so then I started working more in R&D. So like product development. So that's what I do now. I don't work for a specific company. I do consulting for mostly like small startup food companies here in the Minneapolis area. So it's really fun. I mean, I get to develop new food products and work with small companies. So it's really fun.
Have you figured out how to like, can you make your Instagram, and I assume you're on TikTok, you're probably killing it on TikTok. Can you monetize that, like make that a business, or is that where you get consulting gigs from?
I've done a few partnerships. I'm very picky with like companies that I partner with. So I've partnered with a company to debunk some myths regarding MSG. I've debunked some myths regarding soy. And so I have been able to monetize it a little bit, but it's still, my consulting work is where most of my income comes from. I never really started my page to earn money, but at the same time, it is a lot of work. It does take a lot of time. So I've gotten to the point where I'm like, okay, I need to make some money from this because it takes a lot of time. So
it can burn you out. I think you should make like a course on, I'd probably buy it, a little digital course just talking about food science.
I've thought about it. I just don't have time to do that. But yeah, eventually I'd like to do something like that.
Hear ya. That's awesome. What about it? Was this in response, food, there's Food Babe. She's like the original misinformation spreader about food and like additives and all sorts of stuff. Was this kind of like a spin off that, like, all right, I'm just going to give the good information,
That's what I figured.
That's where my name came from.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think if I'm not mistaken, you said you had a BS in biochemical engineering. Is that what
Chemical
I heard?
engineering.
Chemical engineering. She has a BS in BS.
Yeah.
She's
That's
very
what I
good at it.
remember.
She's very good at it.
She is really
Yeah,
good.
that was the main person that I was annoyed with. And so that's why I chose Food Science Babe for my name.
That's awesome. I love it. We're going to actually have the Farm Babe on, I don't know if it's next week or a couple weeks, but basically, going over farming practices, because there's more misinformation around that as well. So
Yeah,
very
she's excellent.
cool.
Yeah.
All right. So here's my question. What are because I get the same questions over and over again. My brother and I were obesity
we all do.
specialists, and he does endocrine. So we get a lot of those same questions. What about what are the top, I'd say 5 questions that you get, and maybe we'll pick a few. I kind of want to hear and then maybe learn some stuff from you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the topic that gets I don't know, maybe there's the most misinformation around would be organic, GMO, natural, all those kind of things that you see labels on the front of the package, and people think they're buying something better for them or better for the environment. But I talk a lot about how those labels don't necessarily translate into those things. So I would say those topics are the most. It's kind of weird that they're controversial because they really shouldn't be. But yeah, you get a lot of people that get angry when their beliefs get challenged, which I understand because I used to have a lot of false beliefs regarding that kind of stuff. And when you have those beliefs for so long and they get challenged, and it's like, oh, I've been spending all this money on these things that I thought were better for me, and now you're learning that they're not. It can be, yeah, people get defensive. So I would say just those labels on the front of the package are the things that people have the most questions about. Like, do I need to pay more for this? Or, am I really doing something better for the environment if I'm buying this label? So
yeah. This, like what you just said, it even transcends other sort of hot button type things like politics, right? What you're talking about literally gets into policy. And so then it becomes political debates. And then you get into some of this tribalism that we have to deal with. And I think, and maybe you can touch on this at some point, is there something about Mexico's government banning GMOs or something recently? Does anybody know what I'm talking about? I thought I heard that on the news, like NPR.
Yeah, they actually, so I wrote an article a year ago that they were going to ban glyphosate, which is a herbicide that is used for, you hear it a lot of times being used on Roundup Ready crops and things like that. So yeah, I actually wrote an article about that. I think it was a year ago when they were planning on phasing that out and banning it. And the thing with that annoys me is what's never talked about when you ban something is what is going to replace it. And so obviously glyphosate and Roundup has gotten a ton of horrible press, and it's really not as bad as the media makes it seem, and just people don't really understand just agriculture in general. So it's when you ban an herbicide, what the discussion people are never talking about what is replacing it. And what happens is when you ban an herbicide like glyphosate, which is actually one of the safest, least toxic herbicides available to farmers, what's going to replace it is going to be these older formulations that are more toxic to humans and to the environment. And a lot of times that doesn't get discussed. And the farmers that are using it responsibly and effectively, now they can't use it anymore, and it's difficult for them. So much of this stuff is political, and it's driven by misinformation and consumers that think they're doing something good by advocating for banning something when they don't have the full picture or understand, what is replacing it if this gets banned. So they're fighting for things to get banned, and they don't really know that other side of it. And so that's really frustrating to see, because when you do understand this thing's going to get banned and what's going to replace it isn't necessarily going to be any better, and the farmers are going to be scrambling to figure out what to do, and it's just frustrating because the people that are advocating to ban it, they think they're doing something good. So I can't always like fault them for that. But at the same time, like, that's a huge reason why I started my page too, to just get that other side out there and like for people to understand the full picture of everything versus just like headlines on articles or what they're seeing on the news. So yeah.
That's great.
That would be frustrating.
Yeah.
Because we get frustrated. I mean, we were frustrated when the whole hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin thing for COVID.
Yeah.
Just extreme.
And we're not even infectious disease
Yeah,
guys.
but it's super frustrating because you're like, no, that like it has no effect. Like, and people don't get it. Like, nope. And so it makes us mad, especially, anything that has to do with hormones and weight loss that makes us. So I can imagine you being in this going like, no, you guys, you don't understand.
Yeah.
So, okay. So what would be the label that drives you the most crazy? Like you personally, I guess, on a food.
I would say the non-GMO label. I can't stand the non-GMO label.
Yeah.
It's 100% marketing. People think it not only is it like marketing, but it also creates a lot of confusion and misunderstanding regarding just GMOs in general, because anytime you have a label that says like non or like it doesn't contain something, people just assume like that thing must be bad. Otherwise, why would there be this label saying non-GMO?
Yeah.
And for a period of time, I thought the same thing. Like I was like, oh, GMOs must be bad because why would there be a specific label saying non-GMO? And that's like that GMOs are a topic I've covered extensively, but it's just a lot of that comes from just a misunderstanding of biotechnology, GMOs, and it's difficult because it's not like a super simple topic to communicate, like especially in less than 1 minute videos. And so it's just, there's a huge gap between what GMO, like what it means and like what people think it means. Or a lot of times people just don't even really know. They don't even really look into it. They're just like, oh, I'm just going to buy this label because I think it's better for me. But I mean, the thing that's really annoying about GMO, or what has been considered GMO, so the definition in and of itself is kind of arbitrary because most of the crops that we have today have been modified in some way. And what is designated as GMO is these more modern techniques that are a lot more efficient. They affect a lot fewer genes than, crossbreeding or some of these older methods. And so really it doesn't make sense like to call specific ways of modifying crops GMO and then to say like, oh, those ways of doing it are bad and we should be afraid of these. And it's just crazy to me too, because those more modern ways of modifying crops are so much more regulated. So I mean, it takes, I think it's like an average of like 13 years and like $100 million to bring a GMO to market because there are so many restrictions and regulations around it. But then those are the ones that people are like the most afraid of, but they're the most regulated. So it just really doesn't make sense. Regardless of what technique is being used to modify a crop, like the end product is really what matters. And so just the whole label in and of itself is so arbitrary and it just doesn't really make sense.
So yeah, just for the listeners, could you just give like just a brief overview of the concept of GMO? Like what does it stand for? What is it?
So it's
what is your 1 minute thing that you can't actually
we'll give you 2 minutes.
You can't actually do in
2 minutes.
2 minutes, then no more.
So yeah, I mean, so there's a big umbrella of genetic modification. So that would include more traditional methods like crossbreeding. There's something called mutagenesis that I've talked about that there's ways to modify genes using chemicals and radiation. All those like older techniques are not considered GMO, but they are genetically modifying crops. So it's these newer genetic engineering type ways that, like I said, they're much more efficient. You're only changing, 1 to 3 genes at a time. It's more controlled. And so what the end result is going to be more than these, older methods. And so it's just really designating like a different way to get to an end result of a modified crop. But there are many other ways of doing it that are not considered to be GMO. And like I said, what matters is the end product and that the end product is safe. And the ones that are considered GMOs are regulated and tested to a much greater extent than these other ways. So yeah, like the whole thing just doesn't really make sense to be only afraid of what are considered GMOs. And the non-GMO project has made a business around this non-GMO label, and they make money essentially from scaring people about GMOs and getting people to buy this non-GMO label.
Fear mongering. It reminds me, my neither of my parents are Neanderthals, but somehow my brother is a Neanderthal. But seriously,
first of all, hey, I prefer GMOs. Let that be known.
Yeah,
we're going to start a whole marketing campaign about pro GMO. What is it too much to ask just to have all my food genetically modified to be optimal?
Well, it reminds me of like I think I've gotten some bottles of water or something, and it says like gluten-free or something like that. And I'm like,
of course, what? And it's GMO. It's not GMO.
Yeah, like,
and
it's that's
actually caffeine-free. That's a good point. So that's the other thing with the non-GMO label is that it can be put on foods that don't even have a GMO counterpart. So like orange juice, for example, there are no GMO oranges. Not that it would be a bad thing that if there were, but it's just kind of ridiculous that there's a non-GMO label on orange juice when, so the consumer thinks like, oh, this one sitting next to it doesn't have that label, so this one must be GMO. And it's like, no, neither of them are. This one just paid for this label to put it on there.
I want to call for a ban on GMO labeling.
Yeah, I can't stand that. I actively try to avoid it if I can, which is getting very difficult because a lot of companies are putting it on there, but I try to avoid it if I can.
It really does reinforce the fear mongering.
Yeah.
Here's a naive question. Why aren't oranges GMO? Why can't oranges be GMO?
Well, they can be. They just haven't developed. There hasn't been a need for a GMO orange yet. Like, they are definitely hybrids and, they have been genetically modified, but they haven't been genetically modified in a way where it's like genetic engineering, biotechnology, GMO. There could be in the future. There just hasn't been a need for it yet.
Huh.
My God, I hope to God soon that we have some GMO oranges. I will eat the hell out of those.
There might be. I mean, there's a lot of like disease resistance so that's another thing with GMOs. A lot of people just think like, oh, everything that's GMO is Roundup ready. That's just one trait that has been selected for in specific GMOs. So there's non-browning traits that help to reduce food waste. There are drought resistant. So a lot of these things too, as the climate changes, like drought resistance, being able to grow foods in places where there might be more drought, like all these kinds of things are going to be able to help in the future and to provide food for the population. And to be against GMOs is also, I mean, it is a privileged standpoint too, because it's like there are countries and places that rely on biotechnology to provide food, and to be against that just doesn't really make any sense. And a lot of people would be without food if it weren't for biotechnology. The whole papaya industry was saved by biotechnology and creating a papaya that was resistant to a specific, I can't remember what it was, but a specific bacteria or something that was.
Wow.
Yeah.
So to be against GMOs is to be against science and technology. I mean, it does sound scary. These people are like, I get it. I can understand how they could fear monger. Yeah. And so it just, people listening to this, if you're listening to this, you listen to us and you probably enjoy science. But what about that rice? The rice that is like golden and it's got more nutrient. I don't even know much about it, but
there's golden rice. I think it's increased. I want to say vitamin A.
Yeah,
I think
probably.
It is.
Is this good or bad? I don't know what you're talking about.
It's
difficult and there will be countries that will not allow it just because it's considered to be a GMO when it could be helping to.
Oh my God.
There are places where people are deficient in specific vitamins, and it could be bred into specific like crops that they're eating all the time, but they won't approve it because it's GMO and it's just ridiculous. Wow.
So it's golden rice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it? Remember when those geese used to lay golden eggs?
Not the same.
Oh, okay. Just checking.
That is interesting. I hate the fear mongering. It does. I mean, it sounds really cool to me. Honestly, I'm just like my brother said, like GMO, whatever.
Sounds great. I want to eat some golden rice.
Yeah, no, I bet it tastes pretty good.
Yeah, it is really cool. I mean, it's a great, technology that we have. Like I said, that can be used for, climate change and, yeah, I mean, GMOs are not just Roundup Ready crops, and a lot of times people think that's the only thing that GMO
Can you explain
is.
what that means? Because honestly, I
So
don't know.
Roundup Ready, yeah. So Roundup Ready. So there are Roundup Ready, like corn and soybeans are the biggest crops that people talk about being Roundup Ready. So essentially, they are tolerant to Roundup, which is an herbicide. So you can spray it on these crops, and they won't die. And that's helpful for farmers, obviously, because they can kill weeds without killing the crops.
Yeah, that's great.
But people think that means that these crops are just like doused in Roundup, which isn't the case. It's used at a very low amount. A lot of times it's used even before crops are being grown in the soil because you're going to kill the weeds before you actually grow crops. So it's not that they're being modified to be able to just douse them in Roundup. That doesn't even make any sense. It's just and yeah, I mean there are different GMOs that actually produce an insecticide. They're called BT crops, and those have allowed to reduce overall pesticide usage. So I think a lot of times people think that they increase pesticide usage when that's not the case. Overall, they've been able to reduce pesticide usage because there are certain crops that actually produce this insecticide, so you're not having to spray the insecticide on it, which has reduced pesticide usage.
The future is now.
Yeah. You mentioned the soybeans, so Spencer, my wife's dad had inherited part of a farm, and he actually farms soybeans. And so he was one of the first ones many years ago to tell me, when I didn't understand this whole GMO thing, why this was a debate, and he's a pretty scientifically minded farmer, but he said, it's all, that's a bunch of kind of crazy stuff. And he was the first one to sort of explain it to me from a farmer's perspective. And so I thought, yeah, that was interesting. It was because he does soybeans.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. So I kind of want, can you tell the listeners about like the shelf life? I love that video that you just posted, because I was like, that's interesting. Because like, it's more about the food quality and not actually if it goes bad. Can you kind of give a brief overview?
So one of the biggest, I mean, obviously there are many reasons for food waste, but on the consumer level, a lot of it comes from the date stamps on food, and people think that those are expiration dates, when in reality, those dates are quality dates. They're not safety dates. So you'll see like best by, best before, freeze by. They're actually not federally regulated, which is, a lot of people that don't know that. So manufacturers just put those on there to let retailers kind of know like how long to have it in their store, to let consumers know when it is best before. So that doesn't mean that it's immediately bad or unsafe after that date. It just means the quality is the best before those dates. So a lot of foods can be, perfectly safe after those dates. So that can help to reduce food waste, to understand that like you don't need to throw the food away the second it hits that date, because that's also not an exact science to figure out those dates. A lot of factors go into whether it might spoil before that date or spoil long after that date, depending on how you store it at home, how the shipping conditions were, how the conditions were in the store. So that's never going to be like an exact science to figure out that date. And so companies do their best to try to figure out like when the quality is best before, but again, that doesn't mean that it's like immediately bad. You need to throw it away after that date. So
what are some examples of those? Like specific types of foods where they're not going bad, And I don't know. This is fascinating to me because I don't really know these nuances that you're talking about.
Yeah, so like perishable items like dairy, eggs, meat, you're not going to have, you might have a few days after that date, depending on. So there's also sell by. So sell by means the store should sell it by that date. And then use by is like the consumer should use it by that date. Again, that's quality, that's not safety. So you should always be going by like, how does it look? How does it smell? Milk, the milk that I buy, it'll maybe last a day or two after that date, but not much. But then like items that are in your pantry, like crackers, like shelf stable items, like those can be, I don't know, weeks after that date. So it just kind of depends on what kind of food it is too. And just using, like smelling it, looking at it. But again, it doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, I have to go through and like, I mean, of course, if you have things in your fridge that are like, I just cleaned out my fridge recently. I'm like, oh, this expired in like 2017. I should probably throw that out.
It's a good thing, Spencer. It's a good thing we don't have Rachel, my wife, and her mom on this podcast because there'd be very argumentative stuff. I'm waiting for Spencer to make some sort of sarcastic comment about my ability to eat something that's way expired.
Yeah, I went and got some pesto at his house. I made myself some pesto pasta, and I was eating it, and then I was like looking at the jar of pesto, and it was like 2 years expired.
Shut up.
And I was like, I just saw him eat it. He goes to work, and I'm just staying for like the week, and then I'm like, Jesus Christ, why am I eating this? But no, actually, I think our parents, mom and dad, they're like, it's fine, it's sealed. I'm like, I just ate yogurt that it's like a month of like, and it didn't taste bad, but I'm like, I don't know, I don't trust it. It's so like, milk. What about like meat? Meat is always sell by, but like it seems like pretty accurate. Like the next day, I'm always like, this smells.
Yeah, good. I would say like those types of things. Maybe like you can get a day or two after, but again, like use your smell, look at it, see if it looks okay. But those things like in your fridge, obviously, you're not going to be able to go as far past that date as you are like canned goods or shelf stable packaged items. And then also like when you open something too, like a lot of things that are refrigerated will say like use within 7 days after opening, and like those are pretty good rule to follow because once you open it, obviously it's introducing
cheese bacteria. So cheese always says use within 7 days, shredded cheese, and then like, I mean, a month will go by and it looks fine. There's no mold. It smells good. It tastes good. I'm always like, I don't know. My wife's always like, throw it out. I'm like, I don't know. I think I'm gonna. I like the cheese. Cheese, okay.
George.
Yeah.
Cheese, I typically don't throw away until I see like visible mold on it. So,
that's the way I am.
And even then, I just melt it.
He's like, this will kill off the mold that's going on this thing. That's awesome. Let's see. I'm trying to think of other questions.
Hold on. So I have a question. So this is very timely. I just learned about this, and it's because it just happened. And you may or may not, this may or not be up your alley, but what's the deal with the cultivated meat products that have been studied and now manufactured? And if I'm not mistaken, maybe FDA cleared?
Yeah, the FDA just
cleared some cultivated meat, but this is beyond me. So just to be clear, I listened to this discussion on like NPR radio randomly on the way to take my son to a workout or something during a blizzard last night. And I was like, this is amazing. They're talking about how they already have cultivated chicken, literally made from cells. They compared it to like yeast and, like those types of products. And now they're going to do other things, and how this has a potential great impact on, some of the climate impact that animal agriculture has. And, but yet nobody, sorry, Garth Davis, but nobody wants to go vegan, or at least.
But the vegans are saying that these are basically vegan because it doesn't kill animals.
So fair enough. So
they're saying
but it is real animal cells being cultivated.
Yes.
So if you know anything about this, I'd love to hear about it because this is fascinating to me.
So I don't know a lot. I think it's very interesting, and I think it's I think options are always great. I just think it's very interesting. I'd love to try it. I would love to learn more about it. I know farmers are definitely very against it because it's going to take it could take some of their market, but I don't necessarily think it'll be something that will ever like take over actual meat, but I think it's good to have different options. And for people, that are vegan, or I guess I'm not sure if this would be considered vegan. Like I don't know.
Because it's not killing animals, that they claim that this is vegan.
But yeah, I don't know. I think it's really interesting. I would love to learn more about it. And I think, I don't know. I think that the technology is really cool and options are great.
We'll have to keep an eye on this. I mean, that's amazing to me. The way I listened to it, they very much described it as, like dough and yeast, and they have these huge, like cylinders in these factories, with essentially what are animal cells. So chicken cells or beef cells that are cultivated, and they nourish them to develop into the chicken or the beef.
And they basically 3D print. They 3D printed, and I don't know.
It blows my mind. I mean, it almost sounds weird to me, but they say, and then they had people try it, and it tastes like chicken and whatever.
So
it really is. It's
chicken nuggets.
That's amazing to me.
Chicken nuggets.
Yeah.
You can, obviously, but I think it's going to be really hard to create a nice breast? Piece of steak.
I don't know.
But they're trying. I
don't know. I don't know like how scalable it is, like how I don't know. I don't know a lot about it. I've definitely heard about it, and it is interesting. I think I would love to try it and see how it compares.
I think this is your homework, and then we'll get back in touch in a few months and back on.
Okay, here's a question. What about additives to food, like red number 5 and some of those other fearmonger?
There's a lot of misinformation on like preservatives, colors, flavors, all those kind of things. And the frustrating thing is like additives just sort of get lumped into like one category, or even like preservatives get lumped into one category when there are many different things, there are many different compounds. So you'll see videos of like, just blanket statements like preservatives are bad, which it's like, which one? What are you talking about? There's a lot of different preservatives. Like,
it's like hormones.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those claims, it's like, be more specific. Like, it doesn't make sense to just say like, I mean, even just colors, like there's a lot of different colors. Like if you're going to say, food dyes cause this, it's like, well, which one, like at what dose? And so those are the things I cover quite a bit. And even when people are being specific about like a specific color, it's like, okay, like you're making there's a claim like red number 40 causes ADHD.
Yeah,
like
that's the one I see all the time.
Yeah. First of all, it doesn't cause ADHD. That's not how ADHD works. So there is some evidence that in a very small percentage of children that already have ADHD, it could potentially exacerbate their like hyperactivity symptoms and things like that. But it's like a very small percentage. It's a correlation. Like there isn't a causal link there. Like there's some very weak evidence at best.
No RCT data.
That gets turned into like red 40 causes ADHD. And it's like, no, like there is like a very small amount of, very weak evidence there but it's particularly in children that already have been diagnosed with ADHD. And so things like that, they just get misconstrued into like, this thing causes this thing. And it's like, no, like there could potentially be something there. But again, like it has been, this link has been studied since like the 1950s. And we still have, I mean, it's still like a very weak, like, oh, maybe potentially like it could. So with things like that, sure, you can avoid, food dyes. That's fine. I mean, it's relatively easy to avoid red 40 if you want to do that. But a lot of times it's like, that piece of information makes, specifically parents get worried about feeding their children foods with dyes. And so it's like, I need to cut them out completely from my child's diet, when the other factor to a lot of foods with colors in them is they're high in sugar. They're being eaten at, like birthday parties. And so it's like, can you really say like, oh, this food with this color caused my child to be hyperactive or have more energy? It's like, well, they're eating it at a birthday party. They're, you know what I mean? It's like, it has a lot of sugar in it. So a lot of times too, it's like you see these videos of like, well, I notice when I give my kid, just anecdotes of when I give my child this food with this blue color or this yellow color, like they get, they get angry or they get, they get really hyper. And it's like, okay, well, like there are so many other factors to that. You can't just say like this color, you're not eating the color on its own either, right? You're eating food. So yeah, there is a lot of misinformation regarding colors, regarding preservatives is a big one that just doesn't make sense, because preservatives are actually helping to make foods safer for longer. And so to just say like, oh, like people will just say like, oh, this is a preservative, and like just imply that that's bad. Right. But it's like, just because something is a preservative doesn't mean that it's bad. It's actually helping to make the food safer.
Right. Salt can be a preservative.
Yeah, that's a preservative.
So yeah, for anybody listening, like to me, it sounds like they would need to do some sort of placebo blinded RCT and put these things in capsules that you don't know it's in there, and then have somebody that would be interesting.
And so they have done something. There is a study that basically, so like in Europe, there's like a warning on foods, I think, that are just marketed for children with dyes in it that say something like this could cause hyperactivity or something. And that's literally based off of a study where they gave children, it was a mixture of different colors in a beverage, and there was also a preservative in there. And it's like, and then they had teachers and parents observe their, like what happened after they drank those beverages. But they were like a mixture of a bunch of different colors and a preservative. And so you can't really say like from that, like which ones were causing like different behaviors, or, you know what I mean? So like there's not really good data on that. And like everything, it's like, sure, maybe there could be a link there, but right now it's like, it has been studied for so long, and like there's not a clear link there. So yeah.
That's funny. Yellow, what is it? Is it yellow number 5? Gives you
that's the Mountain Dew. That's what I said. The diet Mountain Dew that I like. That's yellow number 5.
Shrinks your penis or something like that. I saw something.
Oh God. Oh, I just quit diet Mountain Dew.
You better not drink any more of that. Although I heard about those the Neanderthals are okay. I don't know.
Yeah, we could handle a little shrinkage.
She's like, I'm never coming on this podcast again. What is there something about yellow?
No, there are like ridiculous claims like that though, and it's like how they get attention, right? Yeah. It's like, oh, we can't just communicate like this very weak evidence that this like study shows. It's like, no, we have to make it into this thing where it's like it's causing, whatever, and then people are outraged about it. And it's like, that's the big thing too, that people will read a headline or they'll read a news article and there will be a study linked, and it's like, you'll click on the study and it's like, that's not what it says at all. Like,
yes.
So
yes, that's the story of our lives.
Yes.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah, like it's the same thing with low carb is the best for weight loss. It's like this was done in like 5 days, and like it didn't even show anything about weight loss. It was some other mechanism.
Well, and the other way around. It'll say it about low fat.
Yeah, whatever.
All the different things, and it's anyways.
Yeah, same kind of thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's pretty much. Those are the big questions I have. I think anybody listening, if you want any of this type of information in a lot more detail, I would follow Food Science Babe on Instagram and TikTok, right? TikTok.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't think you're on the tweeters. Tweeters is dying right now anyway. I wouldn't mess with it.
I'm like on there, but I don't really.
Facebook. You're on Facebook too. I think I get your Facebook.
I'm on Facebook too. Yeah.
All right. Yep. If you want any good information about food science, please follow Food Science Babe. Any last remarks before we go to our outro?
I would say don't pay attention to marketing labels on the front of your foods, and don't be afraid of. Don't follow people that are making you afraid of food.
I think that's great
basically.
advice. I love it. Thank you so much
All
for
right.
being on our podcast.
And we'll have her back on after she eats more of the cultivated products.
The lab.
Once I try that, I'll come back on.
Perfect. All right. Thank you.
This podcast is for entertainment and education and information purposes only. Remember, the physicians on this podcast are not your physician. It should not be considered professional or personalized medical advice. It should not be used to replace speaking with your physician or medical professional to discuss your specific health concerns. The topics discussed should not be used solely to diagnose or treat any condition. As a result, we are not responsible for any unwanted medical outcomes. The views and opinions discussed are of those of the host only and do not represent those of any other entities.